briefly 1 hour of time, I'll be talking to you about qualitative research. So most of you are from um, natural science background, and we are more oriented towards social science. Though our bachelor's is in agricultural sciences, from masters we have took up agricultural economics. So where we talk about, or where we discuss social aspects. It could be related to adoption of a technology or impact of a technology, how farmers behave in a certain set of situations, how prices behave. Or like, for if you take a specific case of like environmental science or forestry science, so a proposed project, what are the costs and returns while taking into account the environmental costs and environmental benefits. Also looking at the valuation of those resources from people's perspective. So there are broadly two ways of looking at a research problem. One is a quantitative one and another one is a qualitative one. So quantitative methods, most of you are already aware, starting from correlation, regression, the cluster analysis, all those multivariate techniques that you use, including your experimental designs, your ANOVA, all those things belongs to class of methods. We call it as quantitative methods. But there is an alternative approach, which is called qualitative research, which is more famous in philosophy and related social science disciplines. So this talk is an effort to introduce those things to you. Okay. So what are the learning objectives of today's 1 hour that we are spending together? So first, my goal is to convince you that we also need qualitative methods, and in what situations or what demands the use of qualitative methods. Okay. And my second objective is to make you understand the basics of qualitative research design and how it differs from the usual quantitative research design that people are used to or very commonly do. But all these things are from a social science perspective, because this qualitative research is mostly used in social science research. So whatever references that I take to quantitative research, don't expect me to go to the examples of maybe a physics or a chemistry or that kind of experiments. All my examples come from quantitative methods in social science, as opposed to the qualitative research design that I'm talking to you about. And to familiarize you with some common terms used in qualitative research, um, I don't intend to be comprehensive in this lecture, meaning I'll cover every term or everything that is important, but I have prioritized a few important terms that are very commonly used in qualitative research, and I'll try to explain those. The intention of explaining those terms, those qualitative terms, is to enable you to read more on this topic. So if you read any book on this topic or you read any particular research paper on this topic, those terms are so commonly used. So if you understand those terms, it will become easier for you to understand those research papers or those texts that you're reading, and it will improve your comprehension. So with these three main underlying objectives, let me go into the specifics. So why people use a lot of quantitative methods? So if you open any journal or if you attend any conference, for that matter, uh, the most of the research that get published or get presented, they use quantitative methods. Why quantitative methods dominates over qualitative method? Is it because the quantitative methods are better suited? Is it because uh, the quantitative methods are superior to the qualitative methods? Most cases, it's none of those two reasons. The most common reason is that it is easy to publish, because the trend so far has been that around 90 to 95 papers published in an economics journal or a social science journal typically use quantitative methods. So the editor, starting from the editors to reviewer, everyone is like trained in quantitative methods, though then few of them know qualitative methods, but majority of them are trained in quantitative methods, and they predominantly work in quantitative methods. So it's a lot easier to convince them, it's a lot easier to publish. uh, I think you already know what is a quantitative method and what is a qualitative method. Since you are from a different background, let me give one example. Um, let me take the case of one quantitative method, that is impact assessment studies. So I'll explain two scenarios where same research problem. Research problem is you want to know the impact of adoption of a high yielding variety. So let us say it's a basmati rice 1121 rice variety. IRI, my parent institute at Delhi, developed that variety, and it has been released for cultivation. So farmers start cultivating this basmati rice 1121, and this money that has been spent on developing this variety, this comes from public, it's from taxes. So government wants to know what is the impact. Are farmers really benefiting from the adoption of this particular variety? Also, as scientists, we also want to know whether farmers are really getting benefits from the adoption of this particular variety. So there are two ways to study this. One is a quantitative approach. What do we do in quantitative approach? We go for usually random sampling. So we select multi-stage random sampling. We select some two states, then we select some districts randomly. Then we select within those selected states, we select some two or three districts, either based on acreage under the variety, or it could also be done randomly. Then we randomly select some farmers. We will have a fixed sample size. A typical impact assessment study will have anything from 800 to 3000 to 4000 sample size. From each village, and the last sampling unit is like village and farmer. So in each village, we sample 30 farmers from each of the villages that are there in the sampling frame. Then we interview the farmers. Rather than saying interview, I would say that a structured interview. So everything is prefixed. You have a questionnaire with you. It will have details of what is the age of the farmer, how much education he has got, and how many acres of land he has. And out of that, how many acres are irrigated, how many acres are dry land. So all these questions are pre-decided based on your hypothesis. You will have your hypothesis that, for instance, educated farmers are better farmers, so they might produce more yield. So you want to control education as a regressor, as an independent variable in your model. So you include that, and you also include a relevant measurement. Age is measured in years. You also want to take in perceptions. So you will take a Likert scale in a 1 to 5, or you take any other 1 to 7 scales. So like you may want to like collect information on technophobia, or are they willing to go for a new technology. All these parameters, all these variables you have, and you just ask those questions in the same sequence as it is in the questionnaire. So you collect data from say 3000 farmers out of which like 1,500 are adopters of that variety and 1,500 are in control group. I think you are very well aware about treatment and control. Here, adoption of the variety is the treatment and non-adoption is a control. Then you come back and do all econometric analysis. You run a regression or you go for other methods of impact assessment, and you finally come up with maybe two sorts of things. One is, what exactly is the economic gain from the adoption? In other words, if you compare the adopters of a variety to non-adopter, on an average, how much extra income they are getting from adopting this particular variety. That's your first insight. Second insight is, who are the farmers who are adopting this variety? That is typically what we call adoption study. For example, farmers whose age is high, they have a lesser tendency to adopt. All these kind of findings you'll come up with. So this example is quantitative method. Okay, typically here we are talking about numbers. Here we talk about like who are adopting, how much benefits they are gaining from adoption, all these things in numbers. An alternate way to this is a qualitative method. In the qualitative method, we do not talk about numbers. Okay, so in a qualitative method, what we do is, and we generally do not go for a random sampling, and the sample sizes are typically very less. Say 30 to 35 is the usual sample size. And here what we do is we go for an in-depth interview or unstructured interview. Here we will not ask what is your like education, how much yield you got. All these things are not that important for us. Rather, we talk about how did they find out the variety, from where they find out the variety, what was the process that was involved, and what does he observe, whether he likes this variety, whether the traders like this variety, if they like it, whether they are getting higher price, what is his perception about the good things in the variety. And we just let him speak. Okay, we will not interrupt him, or we do not make him to answer in the concrete boxes. Like in quantitative methods, like, are you happy with the technology? The options are yes, no. He has to tick one. That is quantitative. In qualitative, we just ask, what do you think about this variety? Then he may say, well, this variety is okay. This variety gives higher yield. I'm happy with it. But then he will start telling about, but last year the prices were a bit low because the traders didn't like it, because while milling it breaks. All these things he'll start to talk about. So you collect all those information, then you analyze it, and still we don't use numbers. We try to comprehensively take his perceptions, combine it in the form of a story, then we try to tell a story. Okay, this variety has been introduced, it has been helpful, but the impact here, we will not talk in terms of numbers. We'll talk it in terms of the impact it made. So for example, it helped them to get better education because of the higher income. They're able to use better source of inputs, or because of the positive experience they had here, they are willing to try more varieties. All these kinds of things we can talk about in qualitative methods. So coming back to why quantitative methods have dominated. I just gave you this case because most of you are not very familiar with quantitative versus qualitative in social science research. Most of you are from natural science background. So if you keep this example as a background and talk about these points, it will be easier for you. That's the whole purpose. Here, the replication is more straightforward in quantitative methods. As I told you, you collected data from say 3,000 farmers. So if you collect the same variables, if you use the same measurement scale, more often than that, replication can be done. Or you want to check the rigor of the your findings, you can change your model. You anyhow you have data from 3,000 farmers. You can change from propensity score matching to inverse probability weighted regression. and see if your findings are still valid. But in case of qualitative, it is researchers' interpretation of perceptions. Okay, so there are no method. There is not much of a statistics involved. It's all about how you interpret the perceptions of people. So it's very difficult to actually kind of validate it or check the rigor of it. And quantitative methods is linear and a structured process. So you pre-hand you decide, I want a sample of 3000. There are formula for calculating the sample size based on the research question and based on the expected impact and based on other parameters. And what I mean by a linear and structured process is you already know the sample size. You already know which variable you want to kind of measure. You also know I will do this, then I'll collect the data, then I do this, run this model. If there are problems with this model, I'll switch to this model and I'll use A, B, C for robustness check, then I'll publish. Everything is fixed, everything is structured. But in qualitative, it's not the case. As you go into the field, the design of your study may completely change depending on what responses you get. I'll talk about that more in detail. We call it as emergent design, which means you have a design in your mind, but when you go to field, you think that other design will suit the problem better, then you change your design. In quantitative methods, if you do that, if you change your methods after collecting data, it can be a problematic thing. It is considered not very ethical. But in qualitative, it is an indication that your study is maturing, you're doing well. So that is what we call emergent design. And another reason for quantitative methods is development of statistical software. It's so easy now. You don't need to know any of those calculations that go on behind the screen in your laptop. Or you just need to say, write a command and the software will do all the analysis on behalf of you. And you just need to interpret the results. So it's very straightforward. Though it has advantages, the disadvantages is that people tend to use the softwares, tend to use the methods, but without even understanding the method. So that is a major disadvantage of having too much easy access to softwares. So all these things are fine, right? So there is no harm. These are, you can say, these are the advantages of quantitative methods as well. Then where is the problem? So the problem is the methodologies dictate the research problem. So in your research methodology course, I think you have studied, first you start with a research problem. How do you select a research problem? That's a different question. A research problem should be important, research problem should be novel, you should be able to add something to the theory, or it should have some practical relevance. All those things are the deciding factors in choosing a research problem. But what happens in reality, at least in social sciences, Muthu Prasad knows it very well, people learn a methodology and then they try to find a suitable research problem. We are going in opposite direction. For example, I have learned to use cluster analysis now. I know the codes, how to run cluster analysis in SPSS or SAS or Stata. Now I'll go in search of a research problem where this method can be used. So that is actually wrong. You need to go the opposite way. I still remember one incident which happened when I was doing my master's. So one of my classmates was presenting her colloquium and she was using so many methods. She was talking about women empowerment. She was talking about floriculture. She was also talking about groundwater. So my MSc chairman asked, Why are you taking all this? Take one issue and do an in-depth study in that. And her supervisor got up and answered, actually, we wanted to study floriculture and women empowerment um, since they are correlated, but she is also very good in mathematics. So we wanted to use optimum control theory. So we bring in the concept of groundwater. So most often, since they are good in a particular methodology, they force that methodology in um, that particular problem. Okay, so that is where actually the problem is. And he gave a very nice example for that. He said, just because a marriage hall is free, you cannot force bride and groom to marry, right? So similar way, just because you know a particular methodology doesn't mean that you use that methodology or you find a research problem suiting to that particular methodology. And the common problem associated with it is trying to fit everything in a box of measurement and a lens of verification. Some of the things like uh, emotions, perceptions, or that kind of things, they cannot be easily measured in terms of specific units of measurement. Okay. In those cases, quantitative methods are not suitable, but you still force it on that problem. And while trying to do that, you end up with redundant or superficial results. You end up with results which people already know. I keep going back to my master days because I have so many examples from them. One of the PhD candidate did collect some 30 years district level data for India for 30 years and did some cluster analysis and all those things. And the final result he got is that education in a particular district is positively correlated with economic growth. So one of the professor asked, so this we already knew, right? This is known for like centuries. So essentially what I asked is a cup of water, and instead of taking that water from the tap, you dig a bore well and then you got a cup of water, and now you're saying, I have put a lot of effort, so this water is valuable. But I understand that you collected 30 years data. I understand that you did all those models, but how useful are the findings? It's redundant, it's just superficial, right? So that is where the problem is. And my biggest issue is step early treatment for qualitative methods, which means though qualitative methods are very useful, and though qualitative methods are better suited for certain problems, it is still not accepted as science. It is still did not get the recognition that it deserves. In many conferences, when we try to present a qualitative findings, people expect that we'll show some tables with numbers. And when we present our findings, they say, this is okay, we understand this, but where is the proof? Where are the numbers? Okay. So they just do not understand that qualitative methods are also established scientific methods. There is also a lot of rigor in it. We do lot of the things to maintain the quality of research. We do not give you numbers doesn't mean our findings are not credible. We'll talk about that in a minute, but I want you to read this. I'll give you, say, it's 157 here. I'll give you 4 minutes to read.